This is Dennis from Guitar Lesson Ithaca. Every guitarist should really memorize all the notes on the fretboard, but how do you do that? You need a system whereby you can do that easily. In fact, I'm going to show you 3 different approaches to this, and the truth is you can use all of them in conjunction with each other. And just so you know, you can find all the notes on the fretboard just by the first strategy I'm going to teach you, but there's a shortcut in my opinion, and that's step 3. So part 2 is a little more involved about different relationships on the fretboard, and it's a bit complicated, but then part 3 simplifies it all. But you need to watch part 2 in order to understand part 3. So let me know how you make out with this. Feel free to contact me at guitarlessonsithaca.com if you're interested in lessons. You also might want to check out my 3 courses. One is on 82 exotic and common modes, called For Music Geeks Only at formusicgeeksonly.com. Another one's called the Rhythm Generator at guitarlessonsithaca.com/rhythm generator, where you can be creative with generating an infinite variety of rhythms right within 4/4. And then if you want to expand to other time signatures, especially odd ones, you go to playoddtimes.com. Right, so I asked ChatGPT for a random series of notes, and I asked it to vary whether it presented the accidentals as a sharp or a flat. And I'm going to show you how I can find any or all of these notes on the fretboard. First, I'm just going to do a few keys, and then I'll explain how I did it. And we're only going to do between the 1st and the 12th fret. I'm not going to use open strings, and I'm going to go in order. You must do the 6th string first, then 5th string, then 4th, etc. So here's D. So you must go in that order, and you can't use open strings. Then I'm going to explain how I did this so quick. Okay, now I'm going to erase this and do E flat. Okay, so here's E flat. And then I will show you how to think about this. Right, next is, well, I shouldn't look at the next one because then I'll be thinking about it. C. And then next is, well, no, I shouldn't, I'm not going to look until I'm ready with the pen. Next is B flat. All right, I'm not going to go through all these, but all right, now I'm going to explain how I did this. See, it's good to learn all the notes on the neck, but you need a system. There's 3 possible ways to do it, and well, you have to do a combination of 3. One is called Big Cats Eat Fish. All right, now there's 13 notes here. I represented the C twice, and I'll explain why in a minute. But there's 7 natural note names like C, D, E, F, G, A, B, right? We won't count the C twice. So that's 7 of those. And then 5 of what we call accidentals. So in a different color, I'll underline each accidental. These are the same note with 2 different names. You could call this same sound C sharp or D flat. And same here, D sharp or E flat. So there's 5 accidentals. These would be the black keys on the piano keyboard, and the notes I underlined in red would be the white keys. Right? So what this means is Big Cats Eat Fish means that between B and C, right here, Big Cats, and E and F, there's no note in between. So this is Eat Fish, and this is Big Cats. It just reminds us that those 2, going from B to C and going from E to F, is only 1 fret apart on the guitar. All the other natural note names, like C to D, is 2 frets, D to E is 2 frets, F to G is 2 frets, G to A is 2 frets, and A to B is 2 frets. You must memorize the notes on the lower strings because those are the strings that we use for power chords and bar chords. And so you must memorize like that this is the E string and this is the A string. And then we're going to use Big Cats Eat Fish. So from E to F is only 1 fret because that's Eat Fish. F to G is 2. G to A is 2. A to B is 2. And then here's our Big Cats right here, B to C. So that's only 1 fret, and then D to E. And then you're back at E again. Everything repeats at fret 12. If you didn't get the note that you started on over here, that if this note and this note are not the same, you must have done something wrong, right? Next, on this string, A, whole step up is B, whole step means 2 frets. Then here's our big cats. B to C is 1 fret, C to D is 2, D to E is F. I mean, D to E is 2, E to F is 1, F to G is 2, and G to A is 2. So this is the thing. You must memorize like how to figure those out. Now, we didn't do the sharps or flats yet, but that part is relatively easy. You go up 1 fret from F, and it must be called F sharp. Or go down 1 fret from G, you get to the same note, and it also could be called G flat, same note as F sharp. That's why up here, these are represented together. Okay? So that's easy to figure out. Now let me get rid of all these, let me get rid of this stuff, and I'll just leave the natural note names. So right here, you could see that this is called a B flat because it's just down from B. And also right here, B flat down 1 fret, and you get, B down 1 fret, and you get B flat. So now we've done a little big cats eat fish. This you just got to memorize. You have to memorize these notes. And let me point out that since this is also an E string, here, let me do it in red, then all the notes we memorized at the 6th string are going to be the exact same for the 1st string. So now, by memorizing 2 strings, the lower 2 strings, the 6th and 5th strings down here, you've now memorized 3 strings, half the guitar neck you've memorized, because you got 3 out of 6 strings. So that's pretty cool. Now, you can use Big Cats Eat Fish to name the notes on the other 3 strings, D, G, and B, but we're also going to look at other visualization strategies whereby you can recognize the notes on those strings in relation to the strings we've already memorized, namely 6, 5, and 1. And we're going to get into that in part 2. Now, in part 2, we're going to look at ways to visualize the relationship of the notes so that you don't have to necessarily do Big Cats Eat Fish on these 3 strings, D, G, and B. You can just recognize the notes on those strings in relation to the strings we already memorized. And we're going to go through some key relationships of those. So first, whenever you go 1 string up and 5 frets down, you get to the same note. We're going to use string 6 as our example. Let's choose B. We go 1 string up and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets down. There's a B. If we went 1 string up and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 frets up, that's also a B. So that covers number 1, except that the B string is tuned differently. So let's use the 5 frets down thing. You got 5 frets down on the next string is A. You got 5 strings down on the next string is D. You got 5 strings down, this is a G right here. 5 strings down on the next string, this is a G. But the B string is not tuned that way. This is a B right here, not on the 5th fret like it was before. So this was 5th fret matches fret 0 on here, 5th fret matches 0 here, 5th fret matches 0 here, and now we got 4th fret matches the next string open, fret 0 right here. So the B string is a little different. We call it the B string, for kids of all ages to remind you that it's something different. And it stings you if you're not paying attention. So on the B string, if you're going to it, that is, it's only 4 frets down, gets you the same note, or 8 frets up. In other words, here's a B, an octave up from the open, and then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there's your B string. So that's why I wrote on the B string, there's an exception. It's not 5 frets down or 7 frets up. It's 4 frets down or 8 frets up. Hope that's clear. And then the next relationship we're going to do is the number 2. When you go down a string, it's 7. You go 7 frets down or 5 frets up. In other words, let's take this F. I'm going to go down a string and then 7 frets down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that's the same note. If we had gone down a string and 5 frets up, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's your F. So that's what this number 2 means. The only exception is if you're coming from the B string, I'm going to do it in purple. And let's take this note G. If you're coming from the B string and you go down a string, and then you'll have to go down 8 frets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to get the same note, or up 4, like this would be a G up here, an octave up from where it was here. And so you go 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's some exceptions to rules 1 and 2 regarding the B string. Next, we got 2 strings up and 2 frets up. This is a big one. So when you take this A, for example, and you go 2 strings up and 2 frets up, there's another A. Same thing here if you do like C to C. So the D string, this is an easy way to memorize the notes on the D string. You just associate in your mind 2 frets down and 2 strings down, and then you can know what note it is. So let's just do a quick example. You have, let's say you just randomly put your finger at the 8th fret of the D string, right? In your mind's eye, you associate it with this note, which is a B flat, and now you know this note is a B flat. If that makes any sense. You got to practice this stuff, but it's way quicker than, in my opinion, than doing Big Cats Eat Fish to get to that. Then you'd have to go, okay, well, D string, up a whole step is E, up a half step is F, up a whole step is G, up a whole step is F, up a whole step is B, and then I need this note. This is the target note I was looking for, and then it's B flat or A sharp. It's faster to just associate it, if you see what I mean. That's why we're doing this. The 2 strings up and 2 frets up also is associated with this string, the A string. You go 2 frets up and 2 strings up, and there's another C, or let's take this F. So let's do an example of that. You randomly put your finger on the G string fret 9, right? We want to name this note, okay? In your mind's eye, you should associate it with this note right here, and you know immediately that that's an E note. So it saves you a lot of time. The exception to the rule is from the B and E strings. I'll do a different color. It's 3 frets up. So this note, A, you have to look down 3, not 2, to get to the same note A. On the B string, the same thing. This note, let's say this is a G, which it is, it's a G. You have to look down 3 frets in order to get to the same note G. So there's the exception there. If you're on the E or B string, you go down 3. So let's just do one more. Like here's D, and you go down 3, and there's your D. And if you're on the B string, you do the same thing. Here's your A note. You go down 3, and here's your A. If it's on the G or D strings, you only need to go down 2. So if you are trying to name this note, you look down 2, and you know that it's going to be called an F sharp or a G flat. Let's say if you you're on the D string and you're at fret 13 and you want to name that note, you just look 2 frets back and 2 strings back, and you know that this is going to be called a D sharp or an E flat. Hope all that made sense. You do have to practice this stuff, but this is just an overview. So that covers numbers 1, 2, and 3. Number 4 is 3 strings up and 3 frets down. So if you're at this G, you look 3 strings up and 3 frets down. There's another G. If you want to memorize, let's say, if you put your finger randomly at this note, then in order to name that note, you have to look down 3 strings and up 3 frets. In order to name that note, you have to look up 3 strings and up 3 frets. And you'll see that this is a C sharp or a D flat, and that's what that note would be called right here. So that's what this means, 3 strings up and 3 frets down. Now, if you're going to the B string, then it's only 3 strings. It's still 3 strings up, but it's only 2 frets down. This should say B and E right here. B and E strings. If you're going to them, well, you're only going 2 frets down. Let's take this F, for example. Right, if you go 3 strings up, that's the B string. You're not going 3 frets down like it said a second ago. You're only going 2 frets down, and that relates to this F. And similarly, if you're going to the E string, let's say you're on this note, and you wanted to name it. Well, we already talked about how you could name it like C sharp or D flat because it relates to this here, but you're going up 3 strings and down 2 frets, and you could also name it C sharp that way, if that makes sense. Now, if this is all getting a bit much, we're going to use Cage to simplify all these relationships, because even if you follow this, it may seem like a lot of different things to memorize. And the Cage system helps simplify all that, and that's what we're going to look at in part 3. Okay, now if in part 2 all those relationships got a little confusing, I don't blame you. I hope that the Cage system is going to simplify things. Let's just talk about what the Cage system is in case you're not aware. When you play a C chord, the root is here, the third is here, the fifth is here, the root is here, and the third is here. So these are the black notes. The black notes are the notes you use for a C chord, and these two are the roots. This is a root, and this is a root, which is the same relationship as we saw earlier. When you go from the A string and you go 3 strings up and 2 frets down right here, that's the same as the roots in a C chord. So let's just take another example. You want to name this note. You go backwards and look at this note, F, because, like I said, you go from the A string 3 strings up and 2 frets down, and there you go. There's your C. We call that the C shape, and that relationship holds true. Like if you want to find an A on the B string, all you do is look at this A. So we've covered this so far. Okay. Next, the G shape. When you play a G chord, you play this note, these 3 notes all open, and this note, right? The key thing is here, the relationship of this G to this G to this G, and it looks like this. There's 2 sets of relationships that we already saw that the G shape describes. So when you're going from the E string, up 3 strings and down 3 frets, that's right here. G shape describes that. So we check that box off. It also describes when you're on the G string going up 2 strings and up 3 frets. That's this. G string up. It also is described by the G shape. So we'll check that off. And so let's just explore those 2 a little more before we move on. Like if you want to name this note, okay, you can either use the G shape to name it via this, like down 3 strings and down 3 frets, that's a D, or you can go up 2 strings and up 3 frets, which is still a D. So either way, this is a D. If you wanted to name this note, you could look here and get F sharp, or you could look here and that's F sharp. Those are all described by the G shape. If we take the A shape next, when you play an A chord, you play this note, and then this note, this note, this note, and this note. And then the key thing to look at here is that these are the 2 A's, this and this. And this relationship is the same as that which we've seen already, which is 2 strings up and 2 frets up is described by the A shape, right? So we can check this one off. Let's do some more work on that before we move on. If you want to name this note, all you do is look 2 frets down and 2 strings down, and it'd be called E flat or D sharp. Let's do another one. If you want to name this note, then you look down 2 frets and down 2 strings, and this is called a G sharp or, G sharp or A flat. And this is called G sharp or A flat. So that's all described by the A shape. So we're going to check this box. Next, let's look at the E shape. When you play an E chord, you play this note, this note, this note, this note, this note, and this note. So that's the chord. The important thing is, where are the actual E's? The E's are here, here, and here. So there's two things that the E shape describes. It describes your 2 strings up and 2 frets up right here. So we'll check that box off. And it also describes going 3 strings up and 2 frets down from the D string right here. So we'll check that box off. In other words, this to this, and then also this to this. Let's take each one of those in turn. So if you're trying to memorize, let's say this note, all you do is look down here, and it gives you an A sharp or B flat. You're trying to memorize. Oh, and by the way, that would have worked if you had looked the other way. If you went up 3 strings and down 2 frets, there's the same A sharp or B flat. So it works for any root on the D string. You can just associate it that way. Here, let's do another one. You want this note? Here's another E flat or D sharp. Or you could look at it from this point of view. That's what the E shape roots tell you. And then finally, the last one is the D string. Well, we still have this E here, so let's use this as our example. If you go 3 strings up, if you go 2 strings up and 3 frets up, then this is also E. Okay, so this is the last relationship that the D shape, because when you play a D chord, let's go back for a second. When you play a D chord, you play this note, this note, this note, and this note. The important thing to recognize is that the 2 D's are here and here. So this is the relationship described by this D string. 2 strings up and 3 frets up gives us is the same thing as the D shape. Now we can check them all off. So let's say you're trying to name this note. You could look 3 frets back, 2 strings down, and that will be the same as this note. But let's say you don't know what this note is called on the fly. You do know what this note is called, and if you could see that big relationship, this is like the E shape relationship, and then this is the D shape relationship. The word cage, the reason it's such a good visualization aid is because it always goes in the order C, A, G, E, and D, and I'm going to do that in a second. But it always goes in this order so that, like, if you recognize this is the D shape relationship, then the preceding relationship must be the E shape. Now, this is getting messy. I hope you're following this. Do another example. You're trying to memorize this note. Okay. You look down 3 frets and down 2 strings. That's the same as this, which is also the same as this, which is A. That may seem like a long way to go. So it might be quicker to just visualize this using the C shape, and you can get to the same answer. But the more ways you have of thinking, the better. The reason you're still going to want to explore the D shape and memorize it is because of what happens in here. Like there's scales involved in all this. Let's say you're here and you know that this is a B flat because of this, like this relationship. So you're in D, but now you're looking for the other B flat over here. Like, so suppose you're playing, somewhere over the rainbow. So I don't know what a B flat is right here. I don't have perfect pitch, but I'm guessing it's that's some, and then you just know that somewhere, like the octave up from that, maybe I could call it 8 instead of 1, would be here. And then all the other relationships are there too. Like that's how major scales work. You got whole, and then whole, half to 4, whole to 5, whole to 6, whole to 7, and then half to 1. So this is all just like starting right here. This is like the D-shaped major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And if you're using 3 notes per string, it's no different. Like people think 3 notes per string is different from caged. It's really not. Like, so what? You put the 3 over here instead of over there. The 4 and 5 are still here. And so what? You move the 6 from here to over here. I know I'm digressing a little, but like it's not that different. It's still like a D shape because of the relationship of these 2 roots, this 1 and this 1, this 1 and this 1. But I digress a little. Those relationships are pretty much all the relationships you need on guitar. So just get used to looking at caged and what it tells you. So if you have a root on the 5th string, if you're using finger 3 to play that note, then your other root is up 3 strings and down 2 frets, the C shape. If you're using finger 1 to play that note, then your next root is up 2 strings and 2 frets, the A shape. And now this note would presumably be played with finger 3. But if you switch to finger 3, if you switch to finger 1 to play that same note, now you're going this way, and you would look down 3 strings and up 3 frets for the other note, the other octave that goes with that. Or you could look up 2 strings and up 3 frets to this note, which is also an octave. This is all called the G shape. Presumably these notes would be played from that position with finger 4, let's say. And if you played those 2 notes with finger 1, not at the same time, of course, then you'd going in this direction, and you'd look for your other octave, up 2 strings and up 2 frets. There's the other root. And presumably this would be played with finger 3. And then finally, if you are playing this note with finger 1, presumably you'd be going in this direction. You're now in the D shape. You'd look 2 strings up and 3 frets up, and you get to that note. And then presumably this note would be played with finger 3. The only thing we didn't cover is if now you are playing this note with finger 1, now you're at another C shape. You can look here, and that's another octave going this way, and this is the exact same as the C shape we started on. So you're always using the word caged. It always goes in the order of the letters, C, A, G, E, and D, and then after D is C again, and then the whole process starts over again. You'd have A after that if you had more room, etc. So this picture right here describes all the relationships. If you think that learning all those relationships was a lot, it can be simplified if you just memorize this. If you're on the lower strings, remember, we're going to shortcut these 3 strings by associating them with the lower string. So let me simplify. If you're on string 6 with finger 3, it's the G shape, and here's your 2 other octaves. If you're on 6th string with finger 1, it's the E shape, and here's your 2 other octaves. Okay. If you're on the A string with finger 3, then you're in the C shape. There's your other octave. If you're on the A string with finger 1, you're in the A shape. There's your other octave. The only other thing we didn't do, because remember, we just did the E string going to the left or going to the right, i.e. finger 3 goes to the left and finger 1 goes to the right. You're either in G or E. And then we did the same thing on the A string. If you're playing with the 3rd finger, you're going to the left, which is C shape. If you're playing with the 1st finger, you're going to the right, which is the A shape. If you think it's complicated, we just did 4 out of 5 cage system shapes. And then with regards to the 4th string, if you're playing with finger 3, well, you're still in the E shape because this root is already covered in the E shape diagram. So there's nothing new there. If you're playing this with finger 1, then you have this D relationship. So that's cage simplified. Hope this helped, and I hope it made sense. Fretboard theory is not an easy thing to teach, and you do have to practice it, but that's your overview.